Imagine a Roman soldier, trudging through the unforgiving terrain of ancient Europe. The sun beats relentlessly upon him, his armor is heavy, and his pack is filled with the weight of all his essential equipment. Every step is a reminder of how far he has come, and how far he still needs to go. This is a soldier in the midst of a campaign, a warrior who has marched across deserts, swamps, and snowy mountains. He's endured the elements, the exhaustion, and the stress of constant battle. But despite it all, he keeps moving forward, driven by something far more powerful than simple military training: his food. You might be surprised to hear this, but the power behind Rome's greatest military successes wasn't just the soldiers' iron discipline or their superior weapons. It was their food. When we think about the Roman army, we picture well-armed legionaries charging into battle, but behind the scenes, what truly kept them going was the strategic use of food. While historians have focused on the grandeur of Roman weaponry, military tactics, and the political maneuvering of emperors, the role of food in sustaining the army and enabling them to march endlessly is often overlooked. But food wasn't just a survival tool, it was a weapon in itself. The Roman army was not only highly trained but also extraordinarily self-sufficient. The ability to feed thousands of soldiers, even in the most hostile environments, was one of the most advanced logistical feats of the ancient world. Behind every victorious battle and every great conquest was the steady supply of food that kept the Roman legions not only alive but thriving. When we look back at the military victories that defined the Roman Empire, one thing becomes clear. It wasn't just the strength of their legions or their superior strategy. The Roman army's ability to march long distances, endure harsh conditions, and remain a fighting force even after weeks of battle was made possible by one simple yet powerful tool: food. Whether it was the grain that fueled their bodies or the water that kept them hydrated, the success of the Roman army depended on its ability to feed its soldiers. And it was this focus on sustenance that allowed Rome to conquer half of the known world. This journey through Roman military food isn't just about what soldiers ate. It's about how food played an integral role in shaping the empire's power, resilience, and long-lasting legacy. In this exploration, we will look deeper into what went into the soldier's ration, how it was prepared, and why it was one of the most important factors in the Roman Empire's success. A Roman soldier or legionary was more than just a fighter. He was a disciplined, well-trained individual, prepared for not only battle but also the grueling physical demands of life on the march. These soldiers, some of the most iconic warriors in history, came from all corners of the empire. Whether they were Roman citizens or non-citizens enlisted for service, the legionary's life was governed by strict military rules, a constant regimen of training, and most importantly, the necessity of survival under often harsh conditions. The average soldier's day began at dawn and often extended well into the night. Their duties included everything from training with weapons to building fortifications, clearing terrain, and ensuring the security of the army. When they weren't marching, they were preparing their equipment, organizing supplies, or taking part in rigorous drills. There was no room for laziness or slacking. The Roman military demanded the highest level of discipline and efficiency. But underneath this disciplined exterior, the legionary was also a man who had very basic needs: food, water, and shelter. A typical legionary's life wasn't always filled with heroic battles. 4 months on end, soldiers would march across the empire, often enduring extreme weather conditions, from the deserts of Africa to the frozen lands of Britain. The life of a soldier was harsh, and survival required more than just physical toughness. It demanded adaptability, self-sufficiency, and the ability to endure the most basic hardships. The challenges they faced were not limited to enemy forces. Nature itself was often their most formidable foe. So, what did a legionary carry with him on these long, exhausting campaigns? Besides the expected weapons, a short sword, gladius, and a javelin, pilum, the soldier's pack was filled with supplies needed to sustain him through the toughest of times. Among the most critical items were his food rations, which formed the backbone of his ability to continue fighting. When we think of a Roman soldier, we often imagine them marching with their swords drawn and shields raised. However, the real strength of the Roman military system lay in its logistical foundation. The food a soldier carried wasn't just a source of sustenance, it was a strategic asset, ensuring that the army could maintain its momentum no matter where it went. The Roman legions could march across vast distances, conquer lands, and set up camps in hostile territories, all because of their ability to feed themselves. The daily life of a legionary was marked by simplicity but also by a deeply ingrained sense of duty and resilience. These soldiers didn't just march for conquest, they marched for survival. Every action they took, every step they made, had to be calculated and efficient. The food they ate and the way it was prepared was an integral part of this efficiency. The meals they ate were not just about taste or satisfaction. They were about ensuring that every soldier had the strength and energy to carry out his tasks, from building roads to battling enemies. In any army, food is essential. But in the Roman army, it was more than just a source of sustenance, it was a critical element of strategy. A soldier who goes without food or who is not properly nourished cannot march for long distances, fight with strength, or perform tasks that require endurance. The Roman military understood this concept far better than any of their contemporaries. Food was not a luxury, it was a necessity that directly affected their military operations. The Roman legions would not have been able to maintain their relentless pace of conquest without a carefully organized and reliable food system. Every legionary, no matter where they were stationed, received a daily ration known as a nona. This was the Roman equivalent of modern military rations, an official, standardized portion that ensured soldiers could maintain their strength during campaigns. But the way these rations were handled was far from simplistic. The Roman military was remarkably advanced in its logistical planning, ensuring that each soldier had access to enough food to sustain him through weeks or even months of continuous service. At the heart of the Roman ration system was the idea of self-sufficiency. Soldiers didn't just rely on external food sources. They were equipped to be partly self-reliant, able to carry their rations with them and prepare their own meals. This had several advantages, the most important being mobility. The Roman army could march across vast distances, conquer enemy territories, and set up new camps in the most hostile environments, all while ensuring that their soldiers were properly fed. The reliance on portable, long-lasting food sources like grain and salted meat allowed them to survive in places where fresh food was scarce or non-existent. Food was also a morale booster. The Roman soldier's diet wasn't just about fueling the body, it was also about keeping the mind sharp and the spirits high. In times of peace or victory, food could be used to reward soldiers, reinforcing loyalty and dedication. In contrast, when rations were low or food became scarce, it could have the opposite effect, leading to dissatisfaction and potentially even rebellion. The Roman military knew how to maintain morale through food, using feasts, special rewards, and sometimes even the hope of a warm meal after a long march. Even the preparation of food became a ritual of camaraderie. Meals weren't solitary events for individual soldiers. In the field, soldiers ate together in small groups known as contubernium, tent groups. This collective eating practice strengthened the bonds between soldiers, reinforcing the idea of the legion as a family, working together for a common purpose. The act of preparing and sharing food was as integral to the soldier's daily routine as sharpening his sword. Roman soldiers were more than just fighters, they were also engineers, farmers, and survivors. They carried tools for grinding grain, foraging for wild plants, and even hunting for meat. Their food system was not just about eating, it was a deeply ingrained part of their identity, training, and success. They were prepared for every contingency, from hunting down wild boars to foraging for mushrooms in the wild. This remarkable adaptability gave the Roman legions an edge that few other armies could match. Grain was the cornerstone of the Roman soldier's diet. It wasn't just a meal, it was the fuel that powered the Roman army. The efficiency of the Roman military food system rested largely on this simple, humble crop. But why was grain so important? What made it the primary food source for one of history's most powerful armies? To understand this, we need to examine the nutritional properties, the logistics, and the cultural significance of grain in ancient Rome. The nutritional value of grain. The Roman soldier's diet was designed to keep him energized and strong during his long, physically demanding days. To achieve this, the Roman army relied heavily on carbohydrates, specifically grain. Carbohydrates are the body's primary source of energy, and the intense physical demands placed on soldiers required a steady, reliable source of fuel. Grains like wheat and barley provided the ideal solution. These crops are rich in calories. Each grain is packed with energy that would sustain a soldier through long marches and intense physical activity. But it wasn't just about the calories. Grains also provided essential vitamins and minerals. For example, wheat contains significant amounts of B vitamins, which play a vital role in energy production and red blood cell formation. Barley, on the other hand, is rich in fiber, which is important for digestive health and maintaining consistent energy levels. The combination of these grains provided Roman soldiers with a balanced diet, giving them the stamina needed to keep marching, building, and fighting. However, the simplicity of grain wasn't just about its nutritional content, it was also its practicality. Grains were easy to store, transport, and distribute. Unlike fruits or vegetables, which have a limited shelf life, grains could be kept for months or even years without spoiling. This made them the perfect choice for an army that would often be on the move, far from any major supply sources. The logistics of grain supply. The Roman army was famous for its ability to sustain itself over long distances, and at the heart of this logistical feat was the annona militaris system, the military grain supply. Grain was sourced from various parts of the empire, particularly from the breadbasket regions of Egypt, North Africa, and Sicily. These regions were chosen because of their ability to grow wheat and barley in abundance, and the grain produced was used to feed both the population of Rome and the soldiers stationed at the front lines. Grain was collected as a tax in kind, which meant that it was paid as a form of tribute rather than money. This system made it easier for the Roman government to gather resources quickly and efficiently. The grain was then transported by road, river, and sea to military supply depots, known as granaries, which were strategically located throughout the empire. These granaries acted as the backbone of Roman military logistics, ensuring that grain was always available to feed the legions, no matter where they were stationed. The granaries were carefully organized and located in areas where they could easily supply the troops with what they needed. Each legion had access to a supply chain that would allow them to stock up on provisions before heading out for a campaign. These granaries were not only used for storing grain but also for other supplies such as wine, oil, and salt, all of which were essential for maintaining the soldiers' energy and morale. Grain in the Roman economy. Grain wasn't just a military commodity, it was a cornerstone of the Roman economy. The vast quantities of grain produced in Egypt, North Africa, and Sicily were crucial not only for feeding the army but also for sustaining the population of Rome itself. The grain trade was one of the most significant aspects of Roman commerce. The empire's vast network of roads and waterways allowed grain to be transported efficiently, ensuring that even during times of war, the supply of food to Rome and its legions remained uninterrupted. The Roman government was deeply invested in the production and distribution of grain. The grain dole, or annona, was a government-subsidized program that provided free or subsidized grain to the citizens of Rome. This not only ensured that the population had enough to eat but also helped prevent civil unrest. The distribution of grain was a key method by which the emperors maintained popular support, as it helped them feed a large, often poor, urban population. Grain was also used as currency in certain circumstances. The Roman army was sometimes paid in grain rather than money, especially in provinces where currency was scarce. This system of paying soldiers in grain further demonstrates the significance of this crop to the Roman military. While we often think of the Roman soldier as a fierce warrior, ready to fight at a moment's notice, the reality of their daily life was far more routine and involved practical tasks like preparing food. Their meals, though simple, were a vital part of their existence and essential to their ability to perform. The grinding of grain was one of the most important daily chores for a Roman soldier. Every evening, after a long march, soldiers would sit down around their campfires and begin the laborious task of grinding their ration of grain using a hand mill, known as the molla manuaria. These were portable mills, consisting of two round stones, one on top of the other. The soldier would pour the grain into the upper stone and, with a steady circular motion, grind the grain into flour. The process was not quick. After marching for hours, often under intense heat or through challenging terrain, soldiers were expected to grind their own grain, a task that could take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. But this was not seen as a chore, it was an integral part of their training, their survival, and their role as soldiers. The repetitive action of grinding grain became almost ritualistic, a way to mentally wind down from the day's exhausting duties. Once the grain was ground into flour, the next step was cooking it into a meal. But here's where the simplicity of Roman military food shines through. The options for cooking were limited but incredibly efficient. Soldiers didn't have the luxury of ovens or fire pits like we might imagine. Instead, they had to make do with what they could carry on their backs. But even with these limitations, they created a variety of dishes that would sustain them through harsh conditions. The most basic and staple dish was pulse, a thick porridge made by boiling the ground grain with water and a pinch of salt. This was a filling and nutritious meal that could be eaten alone or supplemented with whatever other ingredients were available, such as cheese, wild herbs, or salted meat. It was easy to prepare and didn't require much in the way of cooking implements, just a pot over a fire. Soldiers often ate pulse for breakfast or dinner as it provided the energy needed to face the day ahead. However, the most important and practical food for the Roman soldier when on the move was hardtack, or biscuitum, a hard, dry flatbread. The purpose of hardtack was clear: longevity. Unlike fresh bread, which would spoil quickly, hardtack could be stored for months, even years, without going bad. These dry, Dense cakes were created by mixing ground grain with water and baking the dough. The result was a product so tough it was practically inedible without soaking in water or wine. In a field where cooking a full meal was often impossible, hardtack was the soldiers' go-to survival food. It provided the necessary calories and could be easily carried along on marches. Soldiers often soaked their hardtack in wine or broth to make it easier to eat. The resulting dish resembled a kind of porridge which was both filling and packed with calories. While it wasn't gourmet by any stretch of the imagination, it was practical, and in a soldier's world, practicality was key. But when the legions were stationed at a permanent base or camp, soldiers had access to bakeries. These bakeries were an integral part of military life, and each major camp had its own bakery with large stone ovens capable of producing loaves of fresh bread. The bread that came out of these ovens was often rough and dense, without yeast or leavening agents. It was hearty, often made with bran and sourdough, and was far coarser than the white bread we are used to today. Soldiers considered it a luxury, a rare comfort in their otherwise harsh and monotonous routine. The bread would be baked fresh in the morning, and soldiers would savor this luxury, particularly after long periods of eating only hardtack. Fresh bread, still warm from the oven, was a treat, and its presence was a sign of stability and good supply lines. The ability to bake bread and prepare meals in a traditional way was one of the few comforts of military life. It also served as a reminder that despite being in a foreign land, Roman soldiers could still recreate some semblance of home through food. It was a small victory in the midst of a soldier's challenging and often dangerous life. Section 5. Pusca, Roman hydration and its role in battle, 1,000 words. While food was essential to the soldier's survival, hydration was just as important. Roman soldiers faced long marches in extreme conditions, often battling the heat of deserts, the cold of the northern regions or the humidity of the marshes. Their ability to stay hydrated, therefore, was critical to their survival and effectiveness on the battlefield. However, the drink of choice for Roman soldiers wasn't simply water. It was pusca, a mixture of water and sour wine, or sometimes vinegar. You might be wondering, why would the Romans drink something so sour? To modern sensibilities, the thought of drinking a diluted vinegar solution sounds unpleasant, even unappealing. However, for the Roman soldier, pusca was a vital, life-saving drink. It was more than just a beverage, it was a strategic tool, developed to meet the needs of the soldier in the field. Let's take a deeper look at the purpose and benefits of pusca. The safety of pusca. The quality of water on military campaigns was often questionable. Rivers, lakes, and wells were vulnerable to contamination, particularly during long campaigns in enemy territory. In many cases, drinking contaminated water could lead to severe illness, including dysentery and typhoid fever, which could incapacitate an entire legion. So, how did the Romans combat this danger? The answer was pusca. Pusca contained vinegar or sour wine, both of which had antiseptic properties. The acetic acid in vinegar acted as a mild disinfectant, helping to purify the water and kill off harmful bacteria. This was crucial when fresh, clean water wasn't readily available. The Roman soldiers knew that by drinking pusca, they could reduce the risk of waterborne diseases, thus allowing them to remain healthy and combat-ready. Pusca as a hydration tool. Another benefit of pusca was its ability to aid in hydration. While plain water is good for quenching thirst, pusca served as a better option in the intense heat of a Roman campaign. The sourness of the vinegar stimulated salivation, and the electrolytes in the mixture helped the body absorb water more efficiently. Modern studies have shown that drinks with low acidity can aid in hydration by helping the body retain water. For the Roman soldier, pusca was more than just a drink. It was an early form of an isotonic drink, helping them maintain their water balance after hours of marching in the hot sun. Pusca's role in combat. But the benefits of pusca weren't just limited to hydration and disease prevention. The drink was also a way to help the soldiers maintain their strength. During the long marches, soldiers lost much of their vital salts and minerals through sweat. Pusca, with its sourness and trace minerals, could replenish the electrolytes needed to keep soldiers going. It wasn't just about quenching thirst, it was about restoring the body's natural balance and ensuring that the soldiers could continue fighting. In addition, the inclusion of honey or herbs like mint and coriander, these additions were not just for flavor. They also provided additional nutritional benefits, helping to boost the soldier's immune system and keep them healthy during the strain of battle. While grain formed the foundation of the Roman soldier's diet, providing the majority of his energy, it was not sufficient on its own. Protein was essential for maintaining strength, repairing muscles, and ensuring overall health, especially during the grueling conditions of military life. The Roman military, ever pragmatic and resourceful, supplemented its soldiers' diets with meat, though not in the quantities we might imagine. Rather than fresh cuts of steak, the Roman soldiers' meat was often salted, smoked, or preserved in some way to make it last during long campaigns. The importance of protein in the Roman soldier's diet. The Roman soldier's diet was designed to keep him in peak physical condition. The demands of constant marching, carrying heavy equipment, and engaging in battle meant that the body required more than just carbohydrates. It needed protein to build and repair muscle tissue. Pork was the most commonly consumed source of protein, largely because of its relative ease of preservation. Unlike fresh beef or mutton, pork could be easily salted, smoked, or dried to make it suitable for long storage. This made it an ideal food for soldiers who were often stationed far from supply bases. In addition to pork, beef, goat, and mutton were also included in the diet when available. These were often sourced locally, particularly when the Roman legions passed through regions where cattle farming was prominent. Fresh meat was a luxury that could only be consumed when the soldiers were stationed in one place or had access to fresh animals through hunting or requisitioning. The value of meat wasn't just in its nutritional content, it was also a symbol of military power and efficiency. In a time when resources were scarce and food supply lines could be easily disrupted, having access to a source of fresh, high-quality protein was a powerful motivator for soldiers. It reinforced the idea that the Roman army was well equipped to supply its troops, even in the most difficult conditions. Salted and smoked meats. One of the most common forms of preserved meat for the Roman soldier was salted pork. Pork was a relatively fatty meat, and this made it an excellent choice for preservation. The fat in the meat acted as a natural preservative, helping it last much longer than other types of meat. Salted pork was not only a reliable source of protein, it was also energy-dense, providing a good amount of calories to fuel soldiers during their intense physical activity. Smoked meat, particularly bacon, was another staple in the Roman soldier's diet. Bacon was easy to transport and could be stored for months without spoiling. When soldiers were on long marches or in places where cooking wasn't possible, they could eat the smoked bacon as it was, or they could add it to their pulse or other dishes to improve the flavor and nutritional value. However, not all Roman soldiers had access to salted pork or bacon all the time. In remote or hostile regions where supplies were scarce, soldiers would often hunt for meat. Hunting was an important part of the soldier's life, and every opportunity to capture fresh meat was seized. The Roman soldier was not just a fighter, he was also a hunter. When given the chance, soldiers would hunt wild boar, deer, hare, wild birds, and even fish from nearby rivers or lakes. This gave them a source of fresh meat and, in some cases, a welcome break from the monotonous salted or dried food they typically ate. In regions near coastal areas, soldiers also had access to seafood, including oysters, clams, and fish. These foods were sometimes seen as a luxury, particularly for soldiers stationed in the Mediterranean or near Roman ports. The availability of seafood, along with freshwater fish from rivers, added variety to the Roman soldiers' diet, ensuring they had access to a wide range of nutrients. The role of fresh meat during campaigns. Fresh meat wasn't something that Roman soldiers could rely on every day, especially during long campaigns in remote areas. But when available, it was considered a treat, a morale booster after long periods of eating dried or salted food. During sieges or when stationed in fortifications, soldiers would have the luxury of slaughtering livestock for fresh meat. In these situations, fresh meat was often served during feasts or special occasions, like victories or religious festivals. On occasion, cattle herds would accompany the legions, and these animals could be slaughtered as needed for meat. The presence of cattle was another example of the Roman army's ability to organize logistics on a massive scale. The army's supply chains were so advanced that they could move entire herds of cattle across long distances to ensure that the soldiers had access to fresh meat when necessary. But it wasn't just fresh meat that mattered, it was the variety that helped maintain the soldiers' strength. The inclusion of different types of meats, from salted pork to wild game, allowed the Romans to maintain a balanced diet, even when they were operating in the field for months at a time. The mix of meats helped keep their meals from becoming too monotonous, which in turn helped with morale and mental health. Hunting, a soldier's duty and a strategic advantage. Hunting was more than just a means of getting food for Roman soldiers, it was also a form of training. The Roman army saw itself as a highly disciplined and capable fighting force, and being able to hunt in the wild was seen as a necessary skill. Soldiers were taught to track animals, use their weapons for hunting, and even set traps. In addition to the physical skills involved, hunting also had a psychological benefit. It reminded soldiers that they could rely on themselves and their comrades, even in the most challenging circumstances. Hunting also played a strategic role in military campaigns. Soldiers could supplement their rations with wild meat, providing themselves with additional sustenance that could make the difference between victory and defeat. Furthermore, hunting helped with teamwork and leadership. In the Roman army, the act of hunting was often a group effort, with soldiers working together to capture and prepare the meat. This fostered a sense of camaraderie and reinforced the Roman military ideal of cooperation and unity. In the heavily meat and grain-based diet of the Roman soldier, vegetables and herbs may seem like a secondary consideration. Yet, these humble plants played a crucial role in keeping the soldiers healthy and maintaining their strength, especially when they were in regions far from their usual sources of fresh food. Vegetables were a key part of the Roman diet, providing vital vitamins, minerals, and fiber that were often lacking in meat-heavy meals. The most important vegetables in the Roman soldiers' diet were onions, garlic, cabbage, and turnips. These crops were widely cultivated across the empire, and they could easily be grown in the soldiers' personal gardens near their camps or fortresses. Vegetables were not only a source of nutrition, they were also valued for their medicinal properties. Onions and garlic, the soldiers' natural medicine. Garlic, in particular, was highly prized by the Romans, not just as a flavoring for their food, but for its health benefits. Garlic was considered a natural antibiotic, with the ability to fight off infections and prevent diseases. Roman soldiers often carried heads of garlic with them on campaigns, ensuring that they had access to this health-boosting herb at all times. Onions were another essential vegetable in the Roman soldiers' diet. They were used to flavor dishes like pulse and were believed to improve endurance and boost strength. Onions, much like garlic, were also used for their medicinal properties. The Romans recognized that onions could treat a variety of ailments, from digestive problems to respiratory issues. These vegetables weren't just for flavor or nutrition. They were also preventive medicines, helping soldiers stave off diseases like scurvy, which could be a significant issue for armies on long campaigns. Cabbage, turnips, and legumes, a nutrient-rich diet. Cabbage and turnips were common in the diet of Roman soldiers, as they were hardy and could be easily grown in the soldiers' camp gardens. These vegetables were rich in vitamins and fiber, helping to maintain digestive health and prevent the nutritional deficiencies that could arise from a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables. In addition to root vegetables, legumes like lentils, peas, and beans were often included in the soldiers' rations. Dried legumes could be stored for long periods, making them an ideal addition to the soldiers' diet when fresh food was in short supply. Legumes were rich in protein and fiber, providing a much-needed supplement to the meat-heavy portions of the diet. Although the Roman soldiers' diet may have seemed simple and utilitarian, it was anything but bland. Roman cuisine, especially in the military context, relied on three key flavor enhancers: salt, olive oil, and garum. These ingredients were more than just seasonings. They were essential to the Roman army's success in maintaining a nutritious and flavorful diet. Let's take a deeper look at each of these components and their significance in the soldiers' daily food preparation. Salt, the soldier's lifeblood. In the ancient world, salt was more than just a seasoning. It was a strategic resource. In fact, the very word soldier is derived from the Latin solidus, which refers to the Roman coin used to pay soldiers, part of which was allocated for the purchase of salt. Salt was not only necessary for flavoring food, but it was also crucial for preserving meat, especially during long campaigns far from supply lines. Salt's importance went far beyond its use as a flavor enhancer. It played a critical role in the preservation of food, particularly meat. Salted pork, bacon, and even fish could be kept for months without spoiling, making them ideal for soldiers who would often be on the move or stationed in areas where fresh food was not available. Salt was essential in ensuring the long shelf life of preserved foods, and without it, soldiers would face significant food shortages. Moreover, salt was essential for hydration. The human body uses salt to retain water and maintain an appropriate electrolyte balance. After a long day of marching under the hot sun, the Roman soldier would have lost significant amounts of salt through sweat. Thus, salting food was not just a matter of taste, it was a matter of survival. It was common for soldiers to carry small sacks of salt in their rations, ensuring they had enough to season and preserve their food, as well as replenish their electrolytes after a long march. Salt also had symbolic importance. The salt ration was often given to soldiers as part of their regular pay, and in many cases, the act of salting food was a ritualistic practice that reinforced the importance of discipline and self-sufficiency. Salt was a reminder of the soldier's connection to the larger Roman state, his sustenance provided by the empire he was fighting to protect. Olive oil, the Mediterranean essential. While salt was essential for preserving and seasoning, olive oil was a key ingredient in Roman cooking, used for both culinary and medicinal purposes. Olive oil was not just a luxury item for the wealthy elite, it was a staple in the diet of the Roman soldier. The ancient Romans were deeply connected to the Mediterranean landscape, and olive oil was an indispensable part of their diet, both for its caloric content and its versatility. Olive oil was used for cooking, as a preservative, and even as a skin moisturizer to protect against the harsh sun and wind. It was particularly valued by soldiers who spent long hours outdoors, as it helped to soothe dry skin and prevent chafing from their armor. Olive oil could also be used as a fuel for lamps, making it a vital part of the daily routine, even after the sun went down. From a culinary perspective, olive oil was used to cook a variety of Roman dishes, including their porridge, pulse, as well as to fry meat and vegetables. Its high fat content provided the necessary calories and energy for the soldiers, who burned significant amounts of energy each day. Additionally, olive oil was often used to enhance the flavor of otherwise bland meals, particularly when the soldiers had to subsist on basic grains or dried meat. Olive oil was also a symbol of the Mediterranean world. It was produced on a large scale in regions like Italy, North Africa, and Spain, and its distribution was a mark of Roman control over these territories. The Roman legions relied on these regions to supply their olive oil needs, and the ability to maintain a stable supply of olive oil was critical to the army's success. Garum, the Roman umami. Perhaps the most surprising of the Roman flavor enhancers is garum, a fermented fish sauce that was as common in Roman kitchens as soy sauce or ketchup is in modern cooking. Garum was made by fermenting fish, usually small fish like anchovies or mackerel, with salt and allowing the mixture to cure in the sun for months. The result was a pungent but flavorful sauce that could be added to almost anything from soups and stews to porridge and meat dishes. To modern tastes, the idea of using fermented fish as a flavoring agent may seem off-putting. However, for the Romans, garum was an essential part of their culinary culture. It provided a depth of umami, the fifth taste after sweet, salty, bitter, and sour, that transformed simple dishes into something more complex and savory. Garum was mass-produced and widely traded throughout the Roman Empire, especially in coastal regions where fish were abundant. Large-scale factories were built for its production, and it was exported to every corner of the empire. It became an integral part of the Roman dietary system and was even included in the rations for soldiers. The Roman army, ever the pragmatists, recognized that garum could be used to enhance the flavor of their otherwise bland meals. Just a few drops of garum could turn a basic dish like pulse into a rich, flavorful meal that provided more than just sustenance. It was a source of comfort in an otherwise difficult and demanding life. Garum also had health benefits. It was high in amino acids, providing a source of protein for the soldiers. While it may not have been a staple in the diet for every soldier, it was an important flavoring that could make even the most basic meals much more enjoyable. The legacy of Roman flavor enhancers. Today the use of garum is largely forgotten, but in ancient Rome, it was indispensable. Salt and olive oil, on the other hand, have endured the centuries and remain staples of modern diets. The legacy of these ingredients reflects the efficiency and adaptability of the Roman military, which recognized that good food was not just about nutrition, it was about enhancing the experience of life on campaign. One of the greatest achievements of the Roman Empire was its ability to sustain a military force that could march across vast distances, endure prolonged campaigns, and conquer lands that stretched from Britain to the deserts of North Africa. This success wasn't just due to the soldiers' fighting prowess or their advanced tactics. It was also due to the remarkable logistics system that supported the Roman army. At the heart of this system was the ability to supply food to soldiers wherever they were, whether they were marching through the Alps or laying siege to a distant fortress. The Roman military didn't just rely on local food sources. They organized food supplies through a combination of centralized planning, local procurement, and military convoys. This intricate supply network allowed the army to remain self-sufficient and ready for battle, even in the most isolated or hostile environments. Centralized supply and storage. The Roman army's logistical success was built on its ability to stockpile supplies in advance. Granaries, large storage facilities for grain, were constructed across the empire, particularly in regions that were key to military operations. These granaries ensured that food could be stored for months, even years, and were located in strategic locations along key supply routes. By maintaining stockpiles of grain and other provisions, the Romans ensured that their legions would never be without food, no matter how far they marched. The empire also built an extensive network of roads and infrastructure to facilitate the movement of food. The famous Roman roads, which were initially constructed for military purposes, played a crucial role in ensuring that supplies could be transported efficiently from one region to another. Supply convoys of wagons and ships were able to carry food and other provisions to distant military camps, making it possible for the Roman legions to march across the empire without worrying about food shortages. While the Roman soldiers' daily life was filled with rigorous training, endless marches, and the constant threat of battle, it wasn't all hardship. The army understood the importance of morale, especially when soldiers were far from home, living in foreign and sometimes hostile territories. One of the most effective ways to maintain morale was through holidays, feasts, and special meals. The Roman military used food as a tool to keep soldiers motivated and to foster a sense of camaraderie among the troops. Festivals, religious observances, and military victories were often marked by lavish feasts that offered soldiers a brief respite from their daily struggles. These feasts not only rewarded the soldiers for their hard work but also reinforced the sense of community and solidarity within the ranks. Religious festivals and their role in military life. Religion played a central role in Roman society, and the military was no exception. Religious festivals were not only an expression of faith but also an important part of the soldiers' routine. The Roman calendar was filled with festivals dedicated to the gods, with Saturnalia being one of the most famous. Saturnalia, a celebration in honor of the god Saturn, was a time of feasting, gift-giving, and revelry. For Roman soldiers, it was an opportunity to enjoy food and drink that they would not typically have access to. During religious holidays, soldiers were often given special rations, a break from the routine and sometimes even luxuries like fresh meat or better wine. These meals were seen as a form of reward for the soldiers' service and helped to reinforce their connection to the larger Roman state. For soldiers stationed in distant provinces, these celebrations were also a reminder of their Roman identity, a way to stay connected to the empire and their comrades back home. Victory feasts, celebrating success. Perhaps the most significant feasts were those held after a military victory. Roman generals knew the importance of rewarding their troops after a successful campaign. Victory feasts were extravagant affairs, with soldiers feasting on roast meats, fresh bread, and fine wine, all items that were a rare luxury on long marches. These celebrations not only served as a reward but also as a way to reinforce the soldiers' sense of pride and loyalty to their commanders and the empire. Victory feasts were also a way to boost morale and ensure that soldiers remained dedicated to their service. After weeks or months of eating simple, often monotonous rations, the opportunity to indulge in a rich, varied meal had a profound psychological effect. It served as a reminder that their efforts were valued and appreciated. The bonds forged around a shared feast were just as important as the military drills and battle tactics that kept the Roman legions at the top of their game. These feasts were typically marked by religious rituals, as the Romans believed it was important to thank the gods for their victory. The most famous example of this can be found in triumphal celebrations, where the general, surrounded by his troops, would parade through the streets of Rome. A lavish feast would follow, where the entire army would be treated to special meals, fine wines, and other treats. Feasts and camaraderie. One of the most overlooked benefits of these feasts was their role in fostering camaraderie and unit cohesion. In the Roman army, soldiers ate together in small groups, known as contubernium, which were essentially their living and eating units. The shared experience of preparing food, eating, and celebrating together created a deep sense of solidarity among soldiers. This bond was crucial to the Roman military's success. When soldiers went into battle, they were not just fighting for their country or their emperor, they were fighting for their brothers in arms. The communal nature of the Roman army's meals also helped to build trust and motivate soldiers. Knowing that a meal could serve as a form of social interaction, soldiers looked forward to the times when they could gather around a fire, share food, and relax with their comrades. These moments helped to ease the psychological burden of military life and kept the soldiers focused on their mission. Gifts and rewards, special treats. In addition to regular feasts and holidays, soldiers were sometimes given special food rewards. Commanders and emperors' emissaries would occasionally provide soldiers with extra portions of food as a form of gratitude or reward. These food gifts could include better quality meat, luxury items like honey or pepper, or delicacies like oysters. Soldiers would also receive bonuses of wine after a particularly successful campaign or when achieving military objectives. These special rewards acted as both a tangible recognition of the soldiers' hard work and a psychological incentive to continue performing well in future campaigns. It helped build a sense of loyalty and commitment to the Roman Empire and made soldiers feel like they were part of something much larger than themselves. While the Roman army was known for its impressive logistical system and its ability to maintain food supplies over long periods of time, there were inevitably situations when supplies ran low. Whether due to extended sieges, supply chain failures, or the unpredictable nature of military campaigns, soldiers often had to adapt and improvise to survive. These moments of desperation were some of the harshest in the Roman military experience, but they also demonstrate the resilience and resourcefulness of the Roman legions. The grim reality of shortages. Imagine a scenario where the Roman army is deep behind enemy lines, surrounded by hostile forces, with no access to fresh food or water. The supply lines are severed, and the usual sources of sustenance, grain, salted meat, and fresh vegetables, are no longer available. The soldiers' ration of grain has been reduced, and there are no other supplies to turn to. In these desperate situations, soldiers had to get creative with what they had. During prolonged sieges, when food stocks were exhausted, the Romans were forced to forage for food. Soldiers would venture out of the camp to hunt wild game, gather berries, and collect roots. While this was often a temporary solution, it could make the difference between life and death. Fishing was also a viable option for soldiers stationed near rivers or lakes, with fish becoming a staple for survival when no other food was available. Eating the unthinkable. But when foraging and hunting weren't enough, the soldiers had to rely on extreme measures to stay alive. This is where the true adaptability of the Roman soldier came into play. There are numerous historical accounts of soldiers resorting to eating horses, mules, and even pack animals when food supplies dwindled to nothing. The meat of these animals, though tough and unpalatable, became a necessary source of protein in dire situations. In the most desperate cases, soldiers even turned to eating the leather from their shoes or belts. They would boil these materials in water to extract nutrients and make a rudimentary broth. The skin of the leather would release a certain amount of collagen, providing a small amount of nutrition to sustain them. While it's hard to imagine soldiers of the mighty Roman Empire resorting to such measures, these instances underscore the harsh reality of military life. The Roman army was not just about fighting wars, it was about survival under the most extreme conditions. The ability to endure, even when it seemed impossible, was a trait that defined the legions. The soldiers were trained not only to fight but to adapt to any circumstance, however grim. Cannibalism, a last resort. In the most extreme cases, soldiers were reported to have resorted to cannibalism during moments of total desperation. This was a taboo practice, one that was universally condemned, but in certain instances, it became a matter of life or death. Historical accounts, like those from the siege of Alesia during Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul, describe how starving soldiers were forced to eat the bodies of their fallen comrades when no other food was available. These dark chapters in history serve as reminders of the brutality of war and the human cost of conflict. The Roman army, for all its grandeur and might, was not immune to the effects of prolonged warfare and food shortages. Yet, the very fact that they could adapt in such dire circumstances speaks to the resilience and resourcefulness of the Roman soldier. The Roman Empire stands as one of the most impressive and enduring civilizations in history. From its rise as a small city-state to its dominance across Europe, Asia, and North Africa, Rome's military prowess was instrumental in its success. We often hear about the strength of its soldiers, the brilliance of its generals, and the grandeur of its conquests. However, behind these monumental achievements lies a crucial, yet often overlooked element: food. The Roman soldier's diet, though simple, was meticulously designed to sustain him through long marches, intense battles, and grueling campaigns. The army's success wasn't just built on iron discipline and superior weaponry, it was built on the ability to feed its soldiers, ensuring they had the strength to endure any challenge. From the grain that powered their bodies to the puska that kept them hydrated, every part of the Roman food system was strategically crafted to support the military's relentless drive. Food was more than just nourishment, it was a strategic tool in the Roman military's vast logistical system. The careful organization of grain supplies, the preservation of meat, and the clever use of flavor enhancers like salt, olive oil, and garum were all part of a larger plan to maintain the army's efficiency, mobility, and resilience. These elements were essential to keeping the legions at their peak, even when they were stationed in remote or hostile territories. Moreover, food wasn't just a matter of survival, it was a source of morale. In times of hardship, the Roman military understood that a well-fed army was a motivated one. Feasts and rewards for soldiers during religious festivals, military victories, or special occasions helped strengthen the bond between soldiers and their commanders, fostering a sense of unity and camaraderie. The shared experience of eating together reinforced the idea that the army was a family, and each soldier was a crucial part of a larger machine working towards a common goal. The Roman army's ability to adapt and survive under extreme conditions, whether through foraging, hunting, or even resorting to extreme measures like consuming their own leather and, in the most desperate cases, cannibalism, demonstrated the soldiers' resilience and resourcefulness. The Romans had mastered the art of self-sufficiency, and their ability to sustain their legions under the harshest of circumstances played a key role in their dominance over much of the ancient world. Behind the scenes of battle, food was a silent hero. It provided the fuel for the legions, the energy for their endless marches, and the strength needed to fight. It was an essential aspect of the Roman military machine that ensured the empire's success for centuries. As we reflect on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, we can't overlook the role of its food system in creating one of the most powerful and enduring empires in human history. In the end, the Roman soldiers' diet wasn't just a mundane part of daily life, it was a weapon in itself. It was as carefully designed and organized as their weapons, and just as essential to their success. Without the ability to feed their soldiers, the Romans would have never achieved the glory and power they did. Rome was built not only by the sword, but by bread, and every soldier's ration was a building block in the foundation of one of the greatest empires the world has ever known. Final thoughts. The Roman army's food system was far more than just a practical matter. It was a key part of their strategy, their survival, and their ability to conquer the world. Whether it was the steady supply of grain, the preservation of meat, or the careful distribution of supplies, the logistics of feeding the legions was an integral part of the Roman military's success. The Roman soldiers' diet may have been simple, but it was efficient, effective, and designed to withstand the rigors of a life in constant motion. As we look back at Rome's legacy, it's clear that food was one of the empire's greatest assets, quietly supporting its soldiers, enabling them to fight, march, and conquer, and ensuring the empire's dominance for centuries.